I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the next speaker, Dr. Matthews. And I'll start saying Dr. Lou Matthews is an accomplished educator and community leader. He is currently serving as Director of Educational Standards and Accountability for the Bermuda Public School System, where he oversees the leadership of principals in the island's 26 primary, middle, and senior schools across the island. He has engaged audiences internationally over the past 20 years as a speaker, scholar, editor, consultant, and community activist. He has also authored several studies and book chapters around the education of Black children. His most recent work, Advancing a Framework for Culturally Relevant, Cognitively Demanding Mathematics Tasks, was featured nationally in the book, The Brilliance of Black Children in Mathematics. The work focused on examining the examination of how teachers can be empowered to create mathematical tasks, which challenge students to think more deeply about themselves, their community, and the world around them. Dr. Matthews was the founding editor-in-chief of the Journal of Urban Mathematics Education, a free international journal focused on urban mathematics research launched in 2008. The journal, through 6 volumes, has published over 1,000 pages of research to date, exceeding 100,000 downloads. Dr. Matthews graduated from the Victor Scott Primary, Bermuda Institute, and holds a Doctor of Philosophy and Mathematics Education from Illinois State University. So I welcome to the podium, Dr. Lou Matthews.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction. It's always difficult to try to have a talk like this here in the midst of a meal. And I know you are debating cheesecake or the presentation. So you might want to take your last bite of that nice cheesecake. I did take a few. As we get prepared, I want to thank all my colleagues just from the Department of Education. Just wave your hand and let everybody know that you're here for coming out to support the colloquium, coming out to support. You know, they are tireless public educators. I make no bones about being a public educator. I love public education. If you want to get in a fight with me, just start the conversation about public education. I haven't been in any fights lately. It's been a couple years, but I'm telling you, I am always roaring and ready to go. I love what we do as a mandate for public education. You know, we look every kid in the eye and we say, look, not on my watch. I don't have an option to give up on you. I mean, you might send your kid to private school or some charter school or something, but public educators have to every day look at children and say, not on my watch. I cannot give up on you no matter what resources I don't have. Public educators. They remind me of my best modern day superhero now. I've been binging all weekend on Lou Cage. That's my new name, Lou Cage, AKA Power Man, AKA Bulletproof. A timely superhero series if you haven't seen that. I want to talk with you today about something near and dear to my heart. This maze. And the topic is from mazes to pipelines for success for our young people. Feel free to keep digging into that chicken. I had that as well. It's pretty good. And feel free to keep digging into your cheesecake. Well, just a little bit about myself. I'm a young man raised single-parent home from the streets and the roads of the lanes, the nooks and the crooks of Parsons Road, on to life as a public school teacher, into the academy at Georgia State University, University of South Carolina, and my doctorate at Illinois State University. And then I felt that call one day to return back to the shores of this country that I love so much, to cast my net into a deeper side of the ocean and to assist public education with its efforts of education reform. I remember my journey in public education, particularly as a high school mathematics teacher at Cedar Bridge Academy, just having left the Berkeley Institute. And I remember walking down the halls of Cedar Bridge Academy and saying to myself, you know, there has to be a better way. And I remember that was 1999, and it was that summer, and back, it was, I guess, in the spring, and just a few months later, I turned in my resignation so that I can go away to study culturally relevant teaching, culturally relevant pedagogy, to work in the interests of our children. I remember my life in public education and in and around my community as one that kind of troubles me. I stand here today with you a bit conflicted, knowing that as a public education leader, I'm a part of a maze, a part of a paradigm, a pipeline, as some have called it, that has been responsible for large outcomes of mediocrity for black males everywhere. I stand to you conflicted because in one sense, I'm a public education leader, and on the other sense, I'm a black male seeking to break free of the system that I'm in. Being on the inside looking out, being on the outside looking in. Wearing a mask at all times. You might be familiar with that struggle. I remember this life in the maze, and I want to talk more deeply about the maze because I realized that it's not something that is so obvious to many folk. It's a powerful, invisible set of circumstances that many black men find themselves in almost inextricably from birth to the time of death. It is a powerful set of scenarios that have worked worldwide to limit the outcomes, limit the access, limit the equity that black men seem so desperately needing to seek and to be a functioning part of today's society. It's a showcase of scenarios that came very clear in my dealings with a young man called Haile. I met Haile when I was a mathematics teacher at the Berkeley Institute. I just freshly minted out of the teacher education program at Alabama State University, and I was at Berkeley. This might have been my first or second year. Well, they started to put these guys in my classroom, and these guys that they thought would bond with Mr. Matthews at the time, these guys that Matthews could form a relationship with. You see, I worked at this school, this academic school, by day, but when I returned home, I lived in the neighborhood, Fenton's Drive in particular, the hood. In fact, some of the guys around the street, including my brother and his friends, Abednego and the like, started to call me the ghetto teacher, because I was living in the ghetto by night and by day and teaching in one of the academic schools. And so Haile, my interaction with Haile made it very clear that I was in a maze. Haile was my neighbor. Yeah, Haile was my neighbor who would wreak havoc around the neighborhood. I mean, he had a talent for rounding up the baddest guys in the neighborhood and graffiti in the walls, selling the drugs, doing all sorts of nonsense around the neighborhood, to where the neighbors are so fed up. What are we going to do with these young guys who are just causing havoc all hours of the night? You know what I'm talking about. You've seen this kind of life. And so one day, to my chagrin, Haile was plopped into my math class. In the back of my math class, said nothing. We were at a kind of a standoff, if you will. But they put him in my class to reach and to teach him. And by slowly but surely, by the end of the term, end of the year, Haile was doing mathematics work and getting good grades. And as we began to connect in the math classroom, not in the community, but in the mathematics classroom. We were fine in the math classroom, but then when we got out into the community, all hell would break loose. And I found myself on the side of the neighbors having to clean up certain things in certain areas and all sorts of stuff. Well, I later bumped into Haile as I was the president of a local soccer club, the Boulevard Community Club. And Haile, to my chagrin again, was a talented football player who one day ended up on our football team, soccer football team. And so Haile, I remember one day he came on the field. It must have been like 10 minutes left. He was a last minute substitute, 10 minutes left. Haile came on the field and he put on such a dazzling display, and he beat his defender, ran on, scored a goal, and he rescued the team from almost certain defeat. In fact, he did it on 2 occasions at the club. One occasion, if we would have lost that game, we would have been relegated to a lower division. This was Haile, the nuisance of the neighborhood, I was president of the club. So I left at that point. I went away because I was frustrated now with my role, my conflict between the community, the ghetto, and working in education. So I went and got this nicely minted PhD in mathematics education from Illinois State University. Did some college work out in the United States, as I talked about earlier. Came back and took up presidency again at my community club. Guess who was there? Yeah, Haile. And now Haile at this point had begun to reform. He used to be called this, he had a nickname because he was also a DJ, Elephant Child, and he had begun to reform. He was in the midst of a full-blown reform at the time, and now he was called Star Child. Yeah, he had produced songs and albums of very positive music around the country and had a groundswell of young people who were following his music. Haile showed up at my club, and Haile was now leading these young guys. I'd grown older now, but he was leading these young guys from around the neighborhood as a football team. At the end of the year, my coach left, and we hired a coach. Guess who we hired? Haile. Haile became our coach. And I remember, so Haile was interesting because he could reach young men that I had now aged out of a certain range that I couldn't reach. So I would show up nicely minted, nicely dressed in my suit and down at the practice session, and Haile is just, got his football gear, and his swag on, and he's down there talking to the guys and marching the guys. Haile and I could talk, and then he'd talk to the brothers, and they would all talk and pray together. And it was a very interesting experience because Haile was on the fringes of his ascent into leadership. We had a tough year. We had young men who would come to our football program with ankle bracelets on, young men who were known targets by the Bermuda Police Service as being being affiliated and associated with one of the most aggressive gangs at the time. Young men whose lives were in very danger. In fact, when we used to have practice, I used to have to look all around my car, do 360-degree turns all the time because I wasn't sure if someone would just associate me with a certain audience of people and would be targeting myself and some of the people around us. In fact, there were some games, and Larry would understand this, there were some football games we would travel to that we would travel only with police guard. Some games we abandoned because we didn't feel safe traveling, and we felt that we needed the protection. Some of the gangsters in the group needed the protection. The only person I could trust to reach them was Haile. Yeah. So we became pretty close, but Haile was not immune to some of the dangers in the community. One night I was coming from work, and I got the call that Haile had been in a grocery store. He does some work for a food supply company and had gone in the grocery store to get some stuff, and he usually checks the shelves of this local store next to his house in the neighborhood. A gunman had come in, chasing another man into the shop, and Haile was there, recognized, ran, both of them killed. I got that call that Haile had died, been shot and killed. I'd never seen a community club and a community just go into an immediate depression, but that's exactly what happened. In fact, the practice before, the training session just before that fatal shooting, there was a Thursday night. I remember looking at Haile and said, Haile, thank you for your leadership. Those were my last words to a young Haile. The one they plopped into my class, the one who terrorized my neighborhood, the one I didn't even want in my classroom teaching him mathematics, the one who then became a part of my club reluctantly. I didn't even want him on the football field. The young man then who joined with me as we led together. And the young man whose life was so tragically taken. So I've taken you just briefly through 3 different stations, right? Stations of community, stations of the school, and the station of leadership in this particular country through the story of Haile. But it helped me to realize that both of our lives were caught together in a very, very complex web of intersection points. Both of us were called to lead men and to lead communities, but our lives intersected in ways that were just so, I want to say unintentional, maybe coincidental, but certainly very meaningful points. Imagine if Haile and myself did, from the time he was in my mathematics class, imagine if we partnered together and said, Haile, what are the things we can do together? What can you teach me? What can I teach you? Imagine if we didn't just bump into each other up until the time of his death. And it wasn't until his death, Larry, that I realized we were both in this maze of limited opportunities, limited outcomes, low expectations for both of us. And except for our intersections, except for our just happened to be in the same place at the same time, we would have never realized our potential together. Haile, the rebel, the student, and the leader was, in fact, Lou Matthews, the rebel, the educator, and the leader. Yeah, we were in this maze, a maze and overtly intentional, directionless space, right? Framed by misdirection and misleading outcomes. It was a maze of both men and mediocrity. When you talk about maze in this country, you have to understand, I'm bombarded by maze outcomes. In fact, I was at a church the Sunday before last, and I looked around the church. It wasn't like this room. It was 70 people in the church, a little small church, 55 women, 15 men. Ratio of 4 and 5 to 1. I bumped into a mathematics teacher just the other day, maybe 3 or 4 days ago. She was telling me about this new learning support class that she had organized for a group of students, 19 students, 17 black males, 2 females, 8 to 1. Yeah. Since 2009, gun and gang violence has gone viral in this country. We've lost 40 lives, not a big number to some, but for Bermuda, that's catastrophic. Yeah? 40 lives lost to gun violence, all young men. 1 every 87 days. Across my desk, just last week, I had a series of applications for psychoeducational assessments. Assessments that somehow paved the way for learning support and all those sorts of special education services. 74% of them males. I'm bombarded by the outcomes of this maze just with these micro statistics. I talked last night after the conversations last night to a young lady who was a speech and language therapist. She said she had a caseload of 23 people, 19 of them black males. If you're doing the math, that's 82.6%. 12 college students this summer were offered insurance internships in Atlanta, Chicago, and London. Understand, insurance is our bread and butter. We are world leaders in the insurance industry. Our bread and butter. 0 black males. Bombarded day in and day out with this maze of men and mediocrity. It's an invisible maze because we almost never talk about it in collective company. This just happened to be my week. In some ways, this maze is characterized by low expectations, limited opportunities, less than desired experiences, undesirable outcomes, failed relationships. You talk to gangsters on the street, and they're going to say a couple of things that are very prominent in their lives. 1, they grew up with a lack of supervision, lack of adult care. They're going to say 2, they were deliberately and intentionally placed in circumstances at some point in their lives by an adult where there was violence and drugs. Yeah, failed relationships. So when you have to forgive me when I talk about being conflicted and when I talk about being tired of conversations about why. Listen, if someone tells me we have to talk to young black men one more time, I swear I'll jump. I'm tired of talking to young black men. I talk to them every day. Guess what? When you talk to them, they're going to say the same thing. They're going to say the same thing the older black men are saying. Same thing the middle-aged black men are saying. They grew up, whether they were successful or not, they had to navigate a maze that was full of lower expectations, limited opportunities, less than desired experiences, that's delivery, and undesirable outcomes, and a maze of failed relationships. So you can have all the talks you like. You won't get past those outcomes. Now, you notice I'm deliberately using some engineering technology, engineering verbiage, engineering words, sure, outcomes and delivery and opportunities. Some have used this idea about what happens to black males in education in this country, have framed it as a pipeline. You know, we haven't said that in open company, but it seems like a pipeline. I understand in terms of how pipelines flow, right? Pipelines take precious cargo, the most precious commodity, and they take it from point A to point B, right? They're massive structures. They do quite well. To call what we do for black males a pipeline is a disservice to pipelines. My sister's an engineer. You better apologize. Pipelines are massive, colossal structures. They are massive engineering feats. Thousands and thousands of kilometers of pipes. They flow through countries, they flow through cities, some flow through your homes. There are different kinds of pipelines. They focus on continuous flow. What they carry is considered the most precious thing. It's oil, it's natural gas, it's even water. The most precious cargo. They have numerous sub-mechanisms. If you want to talk about a pipeline, you can, but you're not talking about what we do for black males in education. So there are pipelines like gathering pipelines whose sole job is to gather stuff, let's say from the open ocean, the oil refineries, the oil fields, to gather them into a space. Larry, when I think about the Bermuda Football Association, you guys are like a gathering pipeline. You do something better than any organization in this country. You bring black males together. You gather. You do better than schools, you do better than churches, you bring them together, yeah? You're like a gathering pipeline. There are other pipelines, there are distribution pipelines, pipelines that when gathered, they take the commodity and they just distribute it to here, to here, to here, to here, so it can be worked on further. It's not the end product kind of pipeline, but it's so critical and so important. Your nursery schools, your schools, those kinds of like distribution pipelines in a sense, right? They may be temporary in nature in terms of their flow, your churches and those kinds of things. Then you have these transportation pipelines, these big animals that can take things through continents and through countries. You know, and so these are these big pipelines that are large, and they focus on uninterrupted flow. You talk about the Keystone pipeline and some pipelines in Africa and some other places. That's why they're so heavily fought over. These are the big generals. It must be protected at all costs. Pipelines. Be careful when you say this thing is a pipeline, because you are accessing some very serious language. Pipelines are complex. Yeah, they have different kinds of stations. There's an injection station, and your sole focus at the injection station is to focus on what comes into the pipe. It's to make sure stuff is getting into the pipe. Your sole job is to focus on, let's get as much of this precious commodity into the pipe where it needs to go. Yeah, and then there's the block valve station. I almost want to say black valve station, but the block valve station can isolate parts of the flow. So if the pipe is acting crazy and you just want to isolate and maybe move around in another direction, you have a block valve station. Then there's my favorite one, the regulator station. The regulator station it looks at the flow, examines the flow of a pipeline and says there's too much pressure. Let me hear you say too much pressure. Imagine a regulator station in the lives of black men all throughout these pipeline systems that just eased up on some of the pressure. At my job, in your home, at your church, just these regulator kinds of stations. And then the pipeline is all concerned about the flow. It's a complex set of engineering technology focused on getting precious commodity from A to B. They're very, very complex. I want to pause here because it's a value that we overlook. We talk about the problems of black males so simplistically. I don't know about you, but in my country we do. We talk about middle schools. If I just got rid of those damn middle schools, everything's going to be fine. Magically, the black man's problems will disappear. Gangs will disappear. Gangs literally will disappear if you get rid of that middle school and go back to what we had before that helped create them. Yeah. Some people talk about simple things. Maybe it's just a teaching strategy. You know, it's just got to be a teaching strategy. I studied culturally relevant pedagogy. Maybe it's that. We look so simplistically and we focus so simplistically on getting that one definition, that one explanation. Maybe it's black-focused schools. Maybe I just need an Afrocentric school. I'm not knocking it, that's what you're, but we focus simplistically on one piece of a solution. And we don't realize that can help lead us to limited sets of outcomes. Why? Because we focus solely on a limited set of outcomes. Two, we proselytize in other people to our movement, wasting time and energy and resources, versus understanding that researchers are needed alongside educators, alongside leaders in an important way. That's not complexity. Stop calling it a pipeline. Yeah. And the third thing we do, we ostracize people who don't believe as we do. Yeah, sorry. I got caught up. So complexity. The next thing you have to understand about pipeline technology is that it's very forgiving. When stuff goes wrong, I can shut stuff down. Yeah, it's like my favorite quarterback. What's his name? It's not my favorite if I'm asking his name. he plays for the Carolina Panthers. What's his name? Cam Newton. Yeah. So guess it's not my favorite, but it's for effect, okay? So he was playing Sunday, right? And something happened. I'm watching this thing, right? And then next thing I know, he's out of the game, right? Why? Because he's a quarterback, yeah? And something obviously has happened to him. I remember, because I think he got bumped by a receiver. I didn't think it was a big deal, but next thing I know, he was out. They had invoked the quarterback protocol, yeah? You heard of that? It's a protocol. See, what we do with quarterbacks are the most precious commodity in the NFL, right? So you surround them with the biggest, baddest dudes. Am I right? The biggest, baddest dudes, the linesmen, they protect this dude, yeah? And you can't even get to this guy. If you do get to him, one, they make rules so that you don't get to him. If you do get to this guy, you better be careful how you approach him. You don't rush up on a quarterback just any old way. If you touch him in the wrong way, all sorts of penalties are awaiting you. Am I right? Yeah, I'm sure. I know that's right. And so if you, I think that's right. If you touch him, if you touch this quarterback in a certain way, and it looks like he has a concussion, a team of people, an independent trauma specialist, because they don't even trust the team to look independently at him. An independent trauma specialist looks to evaluate this quarterback, take him off the field, right? Give him the best possible care, and only when he's ready, we'll send him back into the pipeline. We do far less for black males on a good day who face all sorts of trauma. I know that's right. So be careful when you say we're talking about a pipeline this morning. It's forgiving. It's flexible. You have multiple ways to enter the pipeline. The gathering pipeline is not the same as a distribution pipeline. You have multiple ways to exit, whether it's the GED, the college diploma, whether it's a high school diploma. We need some flexibility because a lot of our brothers are not coming up through the traditional pathways that lead to simple college degrees and PhDs. We have to find some other ways to get our people on the field. Yeah? And so it has to be flexible and deliberate. And our education system, in particular the one I serve, hasn't been known for its flexibility. In fact, we call it punitive in nature, unforgiving in nature. Yes, it has to be very deliberate. My life with Haile is similar to my confrontations with about 4 black males at Georgia State University. They were 4 black male teachers who had just come into our program. They were working on their master's degrees in mathematics education. And one guy, Bivens was his name, yeah. He was a gifted teacher right out the box. Never taught a day in his life. Came to the program. On day 1, he was gifted. He went into a school and started teaching and was teaching like he was a master teacher. I would write a book just on how he taught. You know, when I started to interview these guys, and him and about 3 other guys who were seemingly gifted in this way, they said a few things that you guys, you will all understand as black men. They just happened to go into teaching. They wanted to be something else. One guy was a security guard, yeah? One guy wanted to be an engineer. One guy wanted to be an accountant. Because of finances, because of some weird set of circumstances, became an accountant, became a mathematics teacher. I went to college to study accounting. Why? Because that's what everybody was telling me in this pipeline that I should be, because Bermuda needed accountants. Guess what? I didn't like accounting. I liked math. So I took up math as a side hustle. I double majored. I didn't even tell people for months. I double majored in math as a side hustle because I liked it. By the time I finished college, I hated accounting and loved my mathematics. When I came home, I looked for jobs in accounting because that was my main. I couldn't find them. I was unemployed. I was running on the street looking at all these kinds of interviews just out on the street. My mom came home, I remember, and she needed me to attend a parent-teacher meeting at the school for my younger brother. I went to that meeting for her because she was so tired, and the principal at the school, said, look, I need a math teacher. Are you available for 6 months? And so, hey, I ran and became a math teacher. And that's when I fell in love with this thing called mathematics teaching education and so forth. But I bumped into it. I just bumped into it. Imagine if we were deliberate about our outcomes for black men. Bumped into it. And I hear so many of these tales, I collect these tales around Bermuda of black men who unintentionally fall into greatness. And that's the power of our community. That's having the tech school, the technical training school, and producing all of these entrepreneurs. That wasn't its intention. But the greatness of our community, greatness of our faith carry us through these things. And you probably have similar stories. Then there's clear flow. At all times, people are flowing through this pipeline. It's a simple mathematics problem, a calculus problem. If there's a greater pressure, the rate of change around the intake of these pipes is greater than the rate of change of the outtake. You have these bottlenecks, yeah? But if the intake is so limited, while there's opportunity, but there's no access to the opportunities, you see these slow trickles, and it produces invisible black men you can't see. As invisible as Wonder Woman's jet. She had an invisible jet. I remember that show. Wonder Woman. Okay. The last thing you have to understand about pipelines is that they're very, very, very fixable. Pipelines are fixable. The systems we are in do not have mechanisms to fix themselves. No system can revolutionize or liberate itself. The only thing that liberates systems are people pressure. And so that's why we need people, actors, and action activists who can focus on how we liberate our systems. Don't overlook these pipeline values. Don't get so caught up in pipeline, black males and pipelines, that you don't overlook the values of a pipeline. If only what we did for black males was a pipeline, we'd be all right. So what does it mean, engineering the way forward? I like this metaphor because when I left the academy, I started to think more like an engineer versus a scientist. And let me just explain in a real tongue-in-cheek sort of way what I mean. When an engineer and scientist approach a problem, the scientist asks the question, why? Why is it raining? A scientist will devote his entire life to why it's raining. Right? Why? I know, I was in the academy, guys, I understand. Why black men? Why? I get it. The engineer comes across and says, look, man, maybe the problem has no solution. You might never be able to find out why it's raining, number one. Two, the solution might be so complex, the reason it's raining might be so complex, you can't do anything about it. And two, even if you find a solution, even if you find out why, you don't have a solution. So why are we focusing so much on why? The engineer comes across and says, look, let's just build an umbrella. And so instead of gazing at gaps for black men, we need more people who are focused on umbrella building. And we gave us some nice fancy umbrellas. We need more umbrella builders, action-oriented. My community, I don't know about yours, my community is tired. They're tired of what? I don't want to see one more piece of research on black males at this point in my life, to be quite honest with you. I understand your work. I don't even want to see it. I want to talk about actions and outcomes. Not just actions and outcomes, but shared outcomes. And let me jump to this next slide. So when we look at the program My Brother's Keeper that we talked about the other night, it's a perfect set of outcomes. It's a perfect set of outcomes. All black men entering school cognitively, physically, socially, and emotionally ready. If we just did that alone, we would revolutionize education in this country and others. Just that one. There's a second one, ensuring all children read at grade level by third grade. I add another one to it, ensuring all black males finish middle school competent in algebra and problem solving. Why? You don't finish algebra and problem solving. You're not competent at that space, you're at risk. You're at risk. I have another one too, finish high school doing calculus. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, not everybody can do calculus. Nonsense. Nonsense. I'm not the one to tell that. Utter nonsense. We can. If they can do it, so can we. Yeah, I'm sorry, I sidetracked. So shared outcomes, right? Outcomes. Fred Nichols, who's the father of solution engineering, says, I need you to focus on solution engineering, not problem solving. Solution engineering. Get so focused on the outcome that you talk about the problem disappears. You want to get over gaps and the gap narratives. Focus on outcomes. Outcomes. And then our problem in our communities is we don't share outcomes. So come together by sharing a set of outcomes, yes? Engineer an urgent policy of action. And then empower local teams, ground up stuff, local teams to carry out these actions. And then combine programs into a pipeline approach across agencies. So what might it look like? I was talking to Larry Munson, the head of our Bermuda Football Association. We have these leagues, yes? Former, I think they just voted him out, no? No, they didn't vote him out. He actually just retired. So let's take reading, for example, yes? We want all black men reading by grade what? 3. In Bermuda, that's about age 8, yeah? The Football Association has a league, youth leagues that run, one is the Under 7 League. Now remember, this is a great gathering organization. Black males flock to Bermuda football like no other organization in the entire country. Imagine at the end of the Under 7 program, the Bermuda Football Association, right, assessed all of those young people in that program for their reading proficiency. And anyone not reading, by the time they finish the Under 7 program, is immediately shepherded into the intervention programs so that by the time they 8 they're reading before they get into the Under 9 program. You see, that would be deliberate. What if the Department of Education made it its sole responsibility to partner with Bermuda Football Association to make that happen? That would be a deliberate, not a program, forget programs, pipeline that would take young people through football, these community clubs, and partner. That's what this thing could look like. They gather, we can transport. Parent engagement through the churches. Churches can bring groups of black women together like nobody's business. Yeah? Hey, what if the Department of Education, for example, began to run our parent-teacher association meetings through the churches? They bring them together like nobody's business, am I right? Through the churches. What if we wanted to have a goal of calculus for all black men in this country? What if we combine that to a mentoring program? Because we know at the middle grades and the first 2 years of high school, black men in this country are most vulnerable. So we have to pair it up with a community agency of mentoring that would look at their identity, their self-efficacy, their mathematical mindset. It's a pipeline. What if we took alternative education programs and made its mandatory outcome college? Beyond the GED, college, or professional certification in some applied field, along with therapy as its core. Well, what if a GED programs that came through, if we had GED programs that focused on community care, job training, and college prep at our churches? I was in a part of a program at the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Hamilton where they had a GED program that serviced hundreds of young people, yeah? They had soup in the evening, they had babysitting, 3 minutes, thank you. Soup in the evening, babysitting as well on the side, and then there was job placement advice and consultation with young people that were in that GED program. That's a comprehensive GED program. GED programs as a college prep ground held at a church. Those are pipeline, and as Brother Ty called, in my view, border crossing institutions. We need border crossers as people, but we need border crossing programs and border crossing institutions. So adopt shared outcomes, combine programs into a pipeline approach across this country. This is just a sample of what this kind of engineering mindset could look like. Yes, we need more research and we need more scholarly direction around where we're going, but we need to really combine and look at our head, our heart, and our hands. Yes, that's public narrative, my story, our story, and the mission that is ahead of us. And the mission that is ahead of us is to become our brother's keeper and to move this country forward, your nation forward, and the globe forward around the outcomes for black men. Thank you very much.